You were taught to believe that debt is a problem, something irresponsible, something that should be avoided at all costs, something that represents failure, lack of discipline, or bad decisions. From an early age, debt is presented as a personal flaw. But what if that belief is incomplete? What if it is not just wrong, but deliberately misleading? What if debt is not a defect of the system, but the core mechanism that allows the modern world to function? Most people believe money comes first and debt comes afterward as a consequence. You earn money, then you spend it, and if you spend more than you have, you go into debt. That logic feels intuitive, and it is also inverted. Understanding this reversal is the first step to understanding how banks, governments, inflation, investments, and modern economies actually work. It's also the key to understanding why so many people work their entire lives, follow all the rules, do everything right, and still feel like they're never moving forward. Let's go back in time. Long before coins, banknotes, credit cards, or even banks existed, human societies already functioned through debt. Imagine a small village. A farmer borrowed seeds from a neighbor with the promise of repayment after the harvest. A craftsman delivered tools today in exchange for food or labor in the future. A family received protection from a local leader and owed loyalty or service later. In these early societies, there was no standardized money, no coins, no paper. There were promises, obligations, memory, trust. Debt existed as a social relationship, not as a number on a balance sheet. It was the glue that held communities together. So where did money come from? Money came later. It wasn't the origin of value, but a technology to record, standardize, and transfer debt more efficiently. This is not some fringe theory. It is historical fact. Debt is older than money. It's older than banks. It's older than markets. Money was created to serve debt, not the other way around. Once you truly grasp this, the entire financial system starts to look very, very different. As societies grew larger and more complex, that informal system of trust and memory started to break down. It was no longer possible to rely on personal relationships alone when dealing with thousands or millions of people. This is when rulers, states, and institutions realized something absolutely crucial. Whoever controls the system of debt controls the population. This is when taxes entered the picture. And they weren't just any taxes. Rulers began demanding taxes be paid in specific currencies they issued. Not in grain, not in livestock, not in favors, only in their specific state-issued currency. This detail might seem small, but it's everything. Because once taxes must be paid in a specific currency, everyone is forced to obtain that currency. And how do you obtain it? You have to work for it. Sell your goods for it. Enter the official markets. Suddenly, debt stopped being purely economic and became a powerful tool of social organization. It shaped behavior, it structured labor, it defined hierarchies. This was the moment debt stopped being a neutral IOU and started becoming a form of political power. Now, let's fast forward to the modern world, because this ancient principle is more relevant today than ever. Most people still believe that when you get a loan, the bank is lending you money that already exists. They imagine these big vaults filled with cash, and the bank is just carefully distributing a portion of it. That is not how the system works. Not even close. When a modern bank issues a loan, whether it's a mortgage, a car loan, or a business loan, it does not take existing money from somewhere else. It creates new money, digitally, instantly, out of thin air. The very moment a loan is approved, new money appears in the borrower's account. At the exact same time, a corresponding debt appears on the bank's balance sheet. Think about that. Money is born as debt. And here is the insight most people never learn. Almost all the money in circulation today exists because someone, somewhere, owes it back with interest. No debt, no money creation. No money creation, no economic growth. No growth, systemic collapse. Our modern economy does not function despite debt. It functions because of it. This creates a massive contradiction. The public messaging you hear every day says, pay off your debts, be debt-free, live within your means. At the individual level, this can be sound advice. But at the system level, it is completely impossible. If everyone, all at once, paid off their debts, the money supply would effectively disappear. Loans would vanish. Spending would grind to a halt. Businesses would fail. Banks would collapse. Governments would lose their funding. Debt is not an accident. It is not a side effect. It is not a mistake. It is a structural requirement of the system we live in. The system must constantly generate new debt just to continue existing. And for this system to survive in the long term, debt had to be normalized. It had to stop feeling dangerous and start feeling necessary, even virtuous. So, what happened? Debt was rebranded. You started hearing terms like good debt, leverage, building credit, financial responsibility. Think about it. You are no longer evaluated primarily by what you own. You are evaluated by how well you borrow and repay. Your credit score becomes your financial identity, not your intelligence, not your productivity, not your contribution to society, but your willingness and ability to service debt. Inflation plays a crucial role in this structure. At its core, inflation quietly reduces the real value of debt over time. If you owe $100,000 today, that same amount will be worth less in 10 years. But this benefit is not evenly distributed. If you own assets, real estate, businesses, stocks, inflation often works in your favor. Asset prices tend to rise with inflation, while the real value of your debt shrinks. However, if you rely primarily on a wage, inflation works against you. The cost of living goes up, but your wages often struggle to keep pace. The interest on your debts continues to compound. It's the same inflation, but it produces completely different outcomes depending on your financial position. This is not a flaw in the system. It is a feature of its design. And this is where true inequality is born. The wealthy do not avoid debt. They use it. They borrow money to acquire assets that generate cash flow like rental properties or businesses. That cash flow is then used to pay off the debt. Meanwhile, the assets themselves appreciate in value and their net worth grows. The average person, on the other hand, is encouraged to borrow to consume. They take on debt for cars, electronics, vacations, things that lose value the moment you buy them. The asset depreciates, but the debt remains, and the interest grows. It's the same system, the same rules, but radically different results. The real divider isn't debt itself. It's the knowledge of how to use it. In the past, social control was often enforced through physical force. Today, it's enforced through financial obligation. Your monthly payments have a huge influence on your behavior. They determine where you can work, how much risk you can take in your career, how long you could survive without an income, and whether you feel you have the freedom to say no to a bad situation. Student loans can shape entire career paths. Mortgages can shape decades of your life and labor. And public debt shapes the destiny of entire countries. Debt doesn't need chains anymore. It uses payment schedules. The biggest mistake most people make is not having debt. It's not understanding what debt truly is and how it functions within the larger system. This isn't taught in schools. The system doesn't need everyone to understand it. In fact, It works better when most people simply participate without questioning the underlying structure. Debt did not become the foundation of the modern world by accident. It was engineered over centuries to sustain economic growth, organize labor, and concentrate economic power. Once you understand this, you can stop seeing debt as purely evil, and you can stop seeing it as some magical shortcut to wealth. You can start seeing it for what it really is, a tool, a powerful one. And once you see it as a tool, the question changes. It stops being, how do I escape this system? And it becomes, how do I position myself inside it intelligently? That shift in perspective is what separates financial exhaustion from long-term strategy. It's the difference between survival and leverage. It's the difference between playing the game blindly and finally understanding the rules. Thank you for watching. If this video changed the way you think about debt, consider subscribing for more content that challenges conventional wisdom. See you next time.